Good morning, everyone. Today is the 11th of July, 2021. And today, of course, we observe the July Shotsuki Hoyo. And earlier I read the names of those that passed away in July and August. I got this list from the Buddhist Temple of Marin newsletter. So I'm sorry if I missed the names of people that should have been here, but we'll make sure if we missed any names, please contact Junko or Nancy or any of the officers, and they will be sure to place our names, the names of your relatives and ancestors that had any connection with the church, this temple here, that we should remember them. As I mentioned earlier and multiple times, to remember is to honor them. Most of the ancestors that we have, including mine, I'm a third generation immigrant child, and most of us are immigrant children here, and we remember our immigrant grandparents. They were brave, courageous people who took great risks to leave, in my case, Okinawa, come to a new land, in my case, Hawaii, and made a new life for themselves. And this in itself is worthy of remembering and worthy of respect. They took great risks to their personal lives, and of course they set new roots in a strange new world and a strange new land, which I'm sure they didn't quite understand the ways and means of in Hawaii or continental USA. In June, I spoke about stories. I mentioned Goodnight Moon and the Runaway Bunny. And these stories, of course, are children's stories that I read to my daughter, as many of you must have read to your children. And I suppose the children found comfort in these stories because I was asked to read these stories over and over again. I also spoke about family stories and how my mother, who was a good storyteller, we call it in Japanese, kuchihacho, and she repeated these stories over and over again. And every time she related the story, it got bigger and more dramatic. And I thought my ancestors were deities from Okinawa. But they did take big risks, and they were courageous. And we need to honor them. So today, and this month, in this Dharma talk, I want to say a few more words about stories. I begin with a Japanese fairy tale. After relating this story, I would like to speak more seriously about stories and how they helped us, how they will help us emerge from and their importance as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. July, of course, is Tanabata, or more popularly known as the Star Festival. It celebrates, Tanabata celebrates two lovers, Orihime and Hikoboshi. They are represented by the stars Vega and Altair, respectively. According to the stories, the lovers are allowed to meet each other once a year on the seventh day of the seventh month, if and only if the skies are clear. So in this first slide, we have the slide of the cosmos. As you can see, Vega and Altair, and they live on the opposite sides of the Milky Way gallery. Orihime is the daughter of the Lord of Heaven. She wove beautifully, and she's the Ori, of course, means weaving, and Hime means princess. And she helped her father a lot, weaving the mist and clouds of the heavens. As we can see in the slides, the mist and clouds of the Milky Way. And this is all Orihime's masterpieces. But because Orihime worked so hard for the father, she often despaired that she will not fall in love or meet the man of her dreams. And the father was quite concerned about this. So he arranged for her to meet Hikoboshi, a cowherder who lived on the other side of the galaxy. When they were introduced to each other, they fell in love immediately, and because their love was so deep and their devotion so strong, they forgot to do their work. Orihime stopped weaving, and Hikoboshi let his herd travel and trample all over the heavens. The father was very angry, of course, because he, of course, controlled the heavens and needed some order. And he forbade the two to ever meet again. But Orihime pleaded with the father, and the father said, okay, once a year in celestial time, I'm not sure how long that is, once a year on the seventh day of the seventh month, I will allow you to have a date with Hikoboshi. But because the Milky Way is a celestial river, as you can see, there's a river running across between Vega and Altair that they were unable to cross and therefore meet with each other. So, we are told, a flock of bagpipes came over and formed a bridge over the celestial river, the Milky Way, so the lovers could cross and have a date at least once a year. And here you can see an illustration of that story. But if it rains, the magpies will not come, and the lovers will have to postpone their meeting for another year. So on this day, on the 7th day of the 7th month, the Japanese always pray for good weather and hoping that it will not rain. So I guess the Japanese are very romantic at heart. There are many variations for this story, and if you look on the internet, you can see many variations. But this version is the one that is most widely told. The story, tale of Vega and Altair, offers hope for lovers that even in times of great separation and against all odds, hearts are always connected and will still be together. The wait may be long, but we will finally and inevitably meet. Where there is great love, there's always a chance. And on slide 3, we see on Tanabata, people write wishes on small pieces of colored paper called tanzaku or tanzaki. They write their wishes and hang them on bamboo branches. These trees, thus decorated, become beautiful, wish-fulfilling trees. On the following day, the decorated trees are floated down a river or in the ocean or burnt as an offering. And the ash, the smoke from the offering rises up to heaven, so the Heavenly Father will be able to hear our wishes. So this is the story that we celebrate, or the Japanese celebrate, in July on the 7th day of the 7th month. Now, this story has some implications or meanings as we open up from COVID-19 and try for normalcy in our lives. The past year has taken a great toll on many of us. It seemed as if that the fates, that is the karmic forces, were punishing all of us and punishing humanity. We are hoping for to return to normal, just as the magpies formed the bridge that allowed Orihime and Hikuboshi, who are pining for each other, to meet. The vaccine and the quarantine were those bridges to normalcy. The future, of course, will not be the same as it was a year and a half ago before the pandemic occurred. Before the pandemic, we were free to meet friends in restaurants and interact with people without masks. We hope that the Delta variant of the virus, like the rain that keeps the magpies away, will not keep us from returning to normal for another year. I am, as most of you must, ready to leave the COVID experience behind and forge ahead to the delights of summer and the reopening. But I think it is important to reflect on these past 18 months and prepare for the future. And storytelling is one way we can reflect, heal ourselves, and prepare for the future. We all carry narratives of ourselves, of who we are, where we come from, where we are going. We take bits and pieces of our experiences and weave these fragments into a coherent narrative. The COVID-19 lockdown is one story we can add to the narrative of our lives. A colleague from Stanford University was into journaling, and I didn't quite what I understood this meant, but there was a kind of life review. When older people reach about 75 or 80, they reflect back on their life and think about what their life meant and where they will be going for the rest of their lives. The days and years, of course, are getting shorter, and we think about these things. Anyway, she encouraged elders to write down their life stories. For those that were too frail, she had them speak, and she took notes and would later transcribe them. She always mentioned that this was a healing process for the elder. And she always asked, "What is your spiritual legacy? What will your spiritual legacy be?" And many elders were surprised at this question, she said, because they never thought about that. What will my spiritual legacy be? But in the end, she said, just listening to these stories of the elders, whether frail or not, was their spiritual legacy, at least for her. Confucius, who lived about 500 or 600 years before the Common Era, wrote a kind of life review. And I'll just read it very briefly. He said, "At 15, I set my heart to learning. At 30, I took my stand. At 40, I was without doubt. At 50, I understood the way of heaven. At 60, my ear was attuned to heaven's way. At 70, I followed my heart's desires without transgressing the way of heaven. This can be found in the Analects, Book 2, Chapter 4. In what is perhaps history's shortest autobiography, the sage, that is Confucian, viewed his life as a spiritual journey. It began at 15 when he set his heart on learning, and it culminated at the age of 70 with his total resonance with the way of heaven. He passed away at age 71 or 72, a venerable age for the time. When at the age of 70, Confucius follows his desires without transgressing the way of heaven, he embodies the ideals of a society and he considered himself to the transmitter of the ancient ways of the Chinese dynasty. Confucius looked to the ideals past for models of human behavior, which is in turn mirrored in a moral cosmic vision. For most of us, and I trace our roots to our ancestral immigrants, grandparents or great-grandparents, the struggles of the immigrant experience, and the many wars which our country has engaged in. These experiences make us who we are. Most people recount their personal histories in chapters or periods. For me, it was growing up in Hawaii, where I met Mrs. Nakasone, our time in Japan, my time in Wisconsin, where I studied and for my PhD, my time in San Jose Buddhist Church, Betsuin, my first ministerial assignment, my time at the IBS, and my time at PSR and the GTU. Our time in Kyoto was especially memorable. I should also note that I recall my time in Thailand, where I experienced another Buddhist culture. Personally and professionally, my time in Kyoto, where I studied Buddhism and I was introduced to calligraphy, is most memorable. Looking back, as Confucius did, I was not suited to be a scholar in the traditional sense. Where a scholar is a disorientated, disinterested observer and reporter, I realized that I was more intuitive. I tend to feel and employ my imagination more. This imagination, with this imagination, I make connections with the Buddha Dharma and current events. It was the artist in me. Ministerial work does not really suit me. I am a bit of a cynic. However, I enjoy meeting and helping people, but ecclesiastical politics is not fun. To be sure, what I remember is what I choose to remember. But this narrative has helped me survive the past 18 months. I especially relied on my training as a Buddhist scholar and my experience as a calligrapher. To tell the truth, I was almost oblivious to the pandemic and the sacrifices that we made, not only for myself, but as a family. I was constantly sitting in front of a computer working on a book manuscript. For Divergent, I wrote calligraphy pieces for a forthcoming exhibition. This sitting in front of a computer was not good. I experienced physical decline, and I am now in need of a cane when I walk outside. I also noticed that my speech has deteriorated. I search for words. In short, I have trouble speaking. I have concluded that this computer, however useful it is not a good thing. It was my experience studying the Dharma and the art of calligraphy that helped me through this difficult time. I often think of the Buddha when he sensed his pending demise. He leaves Vaishali and heads north. It seems as if he was heading home to Kapilavastu. He passes away in Kushinagara, 100 miles short of his birthplace. We do not know if he really wanted to return home. The early chronicles give no hint of his intentions. But I suppose reading and writing, looking at the early chronicles, the Buddha was beset with doubt. He doubted his life and the experiences that occurred around Kapilavastu, that this was not the right way, that his life of luxury was not the real world. And he left and he studied with many teachers, and I suppose he was most lonely and doubtful when he was alone searching for the way. The night before the enlightenment, he is confronted with Mara, the Lord of Darkness, and the Mara asks, "What are you doing this for? You're a prince. You have some responsibility or people. What about your life? What about your wife, Yasodhara, and your young son?" And the prince responds, "With a mind that is true and thoughts that are upright, I shall put to rest your desires. I shall travel throughout the world and train numerous disciples. If they train diligently and follow my teachings and attain enlightenment, in the end, sorrow will be no more." I often think about the Buddha's resolve. I, of course, am one of the disciples that received the Buddha's Dharma. I have not trained diligently nor studied as hard as I should have. I am beset with many sorrows and doubts. But the truth and the value of the Dharma were the beacons that urged me on to complete my manuscript. But at every reading or rereading, I find more mistakes. This is my story of how I survived the pandemic. What is your story? How did you survive the lockdown? Many of my friends did not fare well. I lost many dear companions during the pandemic. The pandemic changed my life. My losses have been great. But also I have gained a new appreciation being cloistered for so long. As I reflect on the future of my story and what I think of what my life will be in the post-pandemic world, we are facing a brave new world full of uncertainty, and it is no easy task. But I wonder how my experience of the pandemic will change my life story. I will let you know in 10 years. This is my story. How does your story prepare you for the future? As you emerge from the pandemic, have you thought of your life story? I encourage you to review your life, its story. I encourage you to encourage your elders to review and write down their life story. And if they are too frail, record them on videotape or other things. It is healing. And I want you to think about what will your spiritual legacy be. Storytelling is a great gift. And with this I conclude the Shotsuki Hoyo for July. Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsa. Namo.